the incumbent probably only did one rally in terms of mobilizations. He had a capacity of mobilization in terms of proximity for his party, that is, throughout the national territory.
Even the authorities that take, for example, the Minister of Territorial Administration, he speaks to Cameroonians like kids.
Hello and welcome to Channel Africa Conversations. I'm your host, Peter Ndoro. Now, Cameroon is once again at a crossroads. The country is gripped by tension, and this is following the October 12 presidential election, which has seen the world's oldest head of state, 92-year-old President Paul Biya, declared the winner, extending his more than 4 decades rule. Opposition leader Issa Tchiroma Bakary has rejected the outcome, citing widespread irregularities, while protests have erupted in several cities and clashes between security forces and demonstrators sadly have already claimed lives, and dozens of political activists have been detained. The situation has raised serious questions about Cameroon's democracy, the rule of law, and the future of its governance system, as the country faces growing calls for reform, federalism, and genuine national dialogue. Many are wondering what this election means for the stability and the fate of the nation going forward. Well, to help us unpack these complex issues, I'm now joined by political analyst Paul Anchang and Michael Takie, who's the chairperson of the Coalition of Cameroon Federalist groups and activists. And together we'll explore what's happening on the ground, what the disputed results reveal about the state of the nation, and where Cameroon might be heading to next. And we begin the conversation with Paul Anchang. Paul, thanks very much indeed for joining us on Channel Africa Conversations.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much for Channel Africa for having me on your platform this morning. I'm excited to be here to talk about Cameroon. I'm a Cameroonian, I love my country, and also be able to exchange with the world as to how we feel in Cameroon as to the political situation that's going on in Cameroon.
So many conversations happened ahead of this election, and most people were saying that it's not free and fair and that it's not going to be a reflection of the will of the people. Is that what has come to pass?
Well, there's a bit of a truth in that, in sense where many were looking for an amelioration of Cameroon's electoral code. So that's where people are alluding to the fact that maybe they didn't seem that the electoral process would be fair, in the sense that many viewed that the electoral code in itself, by the Constitution of Cameroon, seemed a little bit much more favorable to the incumbent. Now, there are some articles within Cameroon's electoral code that therefore allow sometimes this contention to be able to exist. Now, we would look at maybe Articles 113 that states that on the day of the election, political parties, part of a polling commission, can actually make known the results of that polling station as well. But the polling station results do not allow for the proclamation of the complete election tally, because there's a 15 days in terms of a lapse between the day of the election and the proclamation of the election itself. Also, prior to the election itself, in terms of pre-election campaign and before the position of political parties and their candidates, there was equally a lot of movement on the side of the opposition on which particular opposition candidate would be actually a consensual candidate. So we saw a lot of the opposition going back and forth as to which particular candidate can be the consensual candidate. There was really not a consensual candidate. We saw towards the end a political party candidate in terms of Issa Tchiroma, who was equally an alliance, equally also with the incumbent, finally garner a momentum that pushed him forward towards the election. But there's still the issue yet in Cameroon's opposition of a consensual candidate. So we saw former candidate Maurice Kamto join forces with Issa Tchiroma Bakary in terms of a subtle alliance between both of their political parties, because Maurice Kamto's candidacy was rejected by Elekam and the Constitutional Council. So therefore, implicitly, we saw a campaign on two fronts of Issa Tchiroma's party, the FSNC party, and Maurice Kamto's political party, the MRC party. and holding for Issa Tchiroma a strong electoral hold with the northern regions of Cameroon. So that's why we've witnessed an electric, I would say, political election and post-electoral contention as well, because now we are in the standoff in terms of Issa Tchiroma Bakary saying he actually feels that he won the election based on the fact that from the reports of his own proceedings, he feels that he had more report of the proceedings on the national territory. And then we have the incumbent President Paul Biya, through the electoral process and the Constitutional Council, and the different voting electoral commissions that say that they show that according to the report of the proceedings, he has more of the report of the proceeding that gives him 53% of the total tally of the elections.
All right, let's try and unpack, because there's different ways to cook the books, if I can use that expression. The first one is getting rid of your opponents, making sure that they don't qualify to vote. Once that happens, you're essentially making the field smaller for you to run. Is that one of the things that happened that can definitely have influenced the result?
Well, it could have equally impacted the results as well. I think that's a factor. The fact that maybe the candidacy of Maurice Kamto of the CRM party, who I would say for the last mandate was pretty much the major political opposition party leader figure, I won't say leader, but figure in Cameroon. I think the rejection of his candidacy led to the militants of his political party joining Issa Tchiroma Bakary's FSNC party in terms of their candidate for the presidential election. So we saw a mutualization really of forces in that regard in terms of the staffing, in terms of the strategy. And we've equally seen that what actually transpired, it actually helped, because in the regions where Maurice Kamto was really much more popular in an electoral circumscription, which is the west region of Cameroon, they swept the votes. In the northern regions, Issa Tchiroma Bakary equally won most of the votes in the north and in Adamawa region as well. He equally won in the littoral region, which is the economic capital of Cameroon as well. So he really won in 4 major regions, and especially also in the diaspora, because Cameroon's diaspora pretty much is hugely more in favor of the opposition. So we saw the incumbent really not gain many votes there. But the real key issue here also is the amelioration of the electoral code, because per the electoral code of Cameroon, if a political party candidate is invested by a political party that was not represented in the prior elections in the state of legislative elections or municipal elections, that political party cannot actually invest the candidate. So the issue here was with the electoral code in terms of the fact that the political party that wanted to invest Maurice Kamto, the Electoral Commission viewed that that political party did not have the ability to invest the candidate. So that's where we see maybe a little bit of issues in terms of credibility and confusion, and that probably led to more and more people in terms of frustrations. I would say the sympathizers and militants of Maurice Kamto wanting to align themselves with Issa Tchiroma Bakary, who, mind you, prior to the election wasn't really as popular because he has been in an alliance with the incumbent and was actually a member of government. He left government about 3 months prior to the elections. So we are seeing a mutation of energies, a mutation of frustration that probably led to what we have seen right now in the post-electoral crisis.
How do we reconcile the figures that were posted at the various polling stations and the figures that were being released by the Election Commission? Is that an area as well of contention, and the variance that is being claimed by the opposition figures, is it significant enough to have changed the result?
For my own part, I don't think it's significant enough to change the result, because in Cameroon's electoral process and an electoral system, you have, after the elections, you have 3 very, very key important commissions that handle the elections. So in Cameroon, in the elections, you have what you call a report of the proceedings on the day of the elections in a polling station. The report of the proceedings is done by a polling station commission that involves a president of the polling station committee that's actually nominated by by Elections Cameroon, which is the independent autonomous body that manages the material organization of the election as well. It equally has a representative of each of the political parties participating in that election in that polling station. And equally, you have what we call scrutiners, who are observers, who are neutral, to be able to cover that polling station. Now, the challenge is you have 31,000 and over polling stations throughout the national territory in Cameroon. No political party in Cameroon is capable of having at least 2 representatives or observers of their political party at a polling station throughout the national territory, because you would have to have about more than 60,000 scrutiners or observers of your political party and the ability to cover the 31,000 polling stations. So that in itself is the first challenge. Now, the second challenge is making sure that on the report of the proceedings, all the observers and all the political party observers sign on the report of the proceeding, attesting to the fact that they witnessed the vote count at the election. Now, it comes now, when we move past that, we get now to the manual, what we call in French, the manual counting at the end of the day of the elections, where the ballot box is turned over and you begin counting the votes at the level of the polling station. It is done manually. So it's not done digitally, it's not done through a numeric process. So sometimes that effort in itself being a manual effort, and that effort in itself, once you leave that polling station commission, it has 2 to 3 days before it goes to the departmental commission that has magistrates and judges. So the manual effort in leaving from the polling station commission, the report of the proceedings, everybody signing off on it in a manual manner before it goes to the departmental, which is still another manual process before it comes now to the National Vote Counting Commission, because the National Vote Counting Commission, that's where the tally of all the report of the proceedings are done, and that's where a political party which participated in an elections can equally confront allegations of corruption, allegations of fraud. And equally, by Cameroon's electoral code, 72 hours after the day of the election, if a political party witnessed maybe say fraud at the level of the report of the proceedings, they have to, within those 72 hours, take recourse by the Constitutional Council, because by Cameroon's electoral code, you can only contest elections prior to the tally of the election results, because once the election results are actually proclaimed, can no longer contest. And that's where we come to the issue in terms of maybe amelioration of Cameroon's electoral code, where you have Article 113 that says you can make known the results from a polling station, but equally Article 133 that says that if you find that the report of your proceedings are not necessarily transparent and you are not in accord with them, then you have 72 hours to go to the Constitutional Council to place a recourse, which will be heard before the Constitutional Council, and therefore that's where we have the challenge. Now, in my opinion as a political analyst, the FSNC party had difficulties or challenges being able to cover all the polling stations throughout the national territory, but they had the popularity in major urban areas to be able to attest to the fact that they won those votes in those major urban areas throughout the national territory and in the diaspora. So that's why I say that for my own part, I think the challenge here is the report of the proceedings, because it has to be done in a legal procedure. It has to be done prior to the proclamation of the result. Unfortunately, what we saw and transpired here is that the elections are already proclaimed by, in terms of Article 137 of Cameroon's Electoral Code, where the Constitutional Council, once it proclaims the results, it is final. There is no longer any recourse or contestation. So going forward, in my opinion, most of the political parties and stakeholders in the elections in Cameroon have to pay key attention to the report of the proceedings and making sure that the report of the proceedings are actually kept and not instead being shown on social media, because what we saw more was if each of the political parties, be they the incumbent or be the FSNC political party, tried to show in terms of propaganda on social media that they had won certain circumscriptions, whereas the most important thing that each of the political parties had to do really was make sure that they authenticate the report of the proceedings and make sure that when they come to the Constitutional Council in front of the National Vote Counting Commission, they can actually do a compilation, and they can actually, in terms of attesting that the fraud during the polling stations.
Okay, so what an election is, at the end of the day, is to get a mandate from the citizens to have the ability to govern. Did Paul Biya get an honest mandate from the citizens of Cameroon?
I think for my part, we have a very contested electorate in Cameroon. We are in a very, very crisis-ridden area where I think Paul Biya, for the first time, saw a huge electoral challenge. Now, mind you, we had 8 million registered voters. We really had only about 4 million people that actually voted in this particular election, which shows that the incumbent won by about maybe no more than a million, no more than maybe 800,000 votes. So it was really challenging for, and mind you, the incumbent probably only did one rally in terms of mobilizations. He had a capacity of mobilization in terms of proximity for his party, that is throughout the national territory. So in my own point, it is very difficult for anyone to attest to the fact that maybe President Paul Biya has a total majority in terms of winning the election. But what we saw is a contested election. Now, what I as a political analyst see instead, we see more of a cleavage in Cameroon where more and more electors are moving towards, in terms of more community cleavages, where we see those in the north voted for a particular face or candidate that resembles them. We saw those in the littoral voted for someone that shares their ideology. We saw those in the south because, mind you, in this particular election, the winners in electoral circumscriptions won by large majorities. So, for example, in the diaspora, the incumbent was beaten severely. In the littoral, in the west, in the Adamawa, and in the north, the incumbent was beaten severely. Now, if you go into other regions, the incumbent won equally in a very large margin. So we see a very, very difficult electorate where people are shared. In my opinion, there is sort of a 50-50 in Cameroon where people are beginning to ask themselves in terms of longevity, in terms of the way forward, what is it going to look like? And that reflects on the electorate as well. So for my opinion as a political analyst, I think we have a very conflicting electorate in Cameroon where people are 50-50. There's really no sure way where they're feeling in terms of the ideology. We saw a huge rate of abstention in the elections. If you have 8 million registered voters, about 4.5 million participated in the vote, but we see manifestations outside. But in the manifestations, there are non-registered voters that are actually manifesting outside. They are manifesting their frustration. So to me, Cameroon is at a stalemate actually currently. We're moving forward. We have a divided electorate throughout the national territory, where in the south or in certain regions, you have an overwhelming majority for the incumbent, and in the northern regions and in certain crisis-ridden regions, you have the opposition that is gaining an intense majority.
Has Paul Biya survived his toughest test in getting over the line with this election, or his toughest test still to come?
Oh, no, for me, Paul Biya, he has just survived. I think he has survived the first toughest test. I think the next toughest test is going to be the legislative elections, because of course, that's what many are waiting for. Then the next equally as well is because many young Cameroonians and many Cameroonians, quite honestly, feel that this is a mandate of transition. Many do not feel that this is a mandate which might particularly go towards the end of the mandate. Many understand that this is a mandate of transition. Even Issa Tchiroma Bakary was talking of more of a refoundation of the values of Cameroon. So when we see the elections, many in Cameroon feel that this is this is a mandate of transition. I don't think Paul Biya has faced his toughest test. I think his toughest test is yet to come, because going into the legislative elections next year, we are yet to see a lot of contestations rather from the different political parties. And mind you, Maurice Kamto's political party that did not participate in the presidential election is going to be eligible to participate in the legislative elections as well this coming March in 2016. So, in my opinion, the toughest test is yet to come as well.
Paul, always great talking to you. Thank you so much indeed. Your insights, always very insightful and valuable. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you, Peter.
Right, let's continue now with our conversation on what's been happening in Cameroon. And we're now joined by Michael Takie. Michael, thank you so much indeed for joining us and welcome to Channel Africa Conversations.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So your organization has come out with a strong statement rejecting the Constitutional Council's declaration of Paul Biya as the winner of the presidential election. Why do you think that this is incorrect?
We absolutely think it's incorrect because there are a lot of disparities with how the results were compiled. The Cameroon, according to the electoral code, electorates are allowed to vote and stay up to when the votes are counted. That's to say the raw data, they are supposed to, if they prefer, they can stay around and gather the raw evidence. And from this evidence compiled by the president-elect, Mr. Issa Tchiroma Bakary, we could tell that he compiled facts right at the polling stations. He compiled every single detail. And to say the least, this is something that had been planned because we understand, the Cameroonian people understand that the results are always massaged from the polling station to when the results get declared. So this is something that we had known a long time ago, so it was well planned. So Mr. Issa Tchiroma Bakary's observers and team collected this data right at the polling station where the ballots were cast. And they compiled these results. And unfortunately, they get rigged, even in broad daylight. And he's challenging the fact that how come information that he collected right at the source is completely different from that which the Constitutional Council presented. So the raw data which the people themselves produced at the source is the fact that was gathered, or the results that were gathered at the polling station. That is exactly what Mr. Issa Tchiroma Bakary gathered. And secondly, we do think the Constitutional Council inflated the results or the numbers beyond imaginable understanding, because Mr. Biya's purported victory rests mainly on the inflated votes. It was extremely inflated in such a way that even somebody who is completely blind would see. And unfortunately, I don't know the kind of, I would say, even they themselves, they don't even know how to steal, because they make the results. How can they be, I would say, they have up to about 50% attendance in some areas that were like no-go areas that they would have, under normal circumstances, struggled to even have a single vote. So they still claim that they're winning in these areas. And that actually puts more, I would say, insult to the injury of Cameroonians.
All right, so were you not able to present this evidence to some kind of authority to say, look, we counted at the polling station 100 votes, and the tally here is saying 50 votes?
Right, that's a good question. I think one smart thing, again, like I said, the regime did not really understand how much this means to us. Because in the years past, 1992, right up when democracy or when multipartyism started in Cameroon, 1992, with Nijon Fundi. They rigged this gentleman's election votes. And since then, at least Cameroonians learned a lesson right up to 2018 when Professor Maurice Kamto went and had the same struggle. So this time around, we were absolutely ready. Mr. Issa Tchiroma Bakary gathered this evidence, and he had a team of lawyers who presented it in France. And he was even challenged that he should bring, the results that he claims or that he is relying on. And he made them public. He published them for everybody to see, even before the Constitutional Council came up with this their sham that they pronounced to the people on the 27th, on Monday. So everything is out there for anyone who is looking for the truth to see. The results that were collected at the polling stations by Mr. Issa Tchiroma Bakary are, they are publicly available for everyone to see. How the incumbent and his team managed to manipulate Cameroonians, to play Cameroonians in broad daylight, without shame, without an iota of shame. Mr. Issa Tchiroma Bakary's team had already presented this information to them and even challenged them that you bring your own hard evidence. Where did you get yours from? Yet they wouldn't listen.
So how did the authorities explain the variance? Because somebody's figures must be wrong. Did they say that Mr. Bakary's tabulation is wrong, or did they have another explanation?
Unfortunately, we are talking about Cameroon, a dictatorship where I think a lot of condescension in that country, where even the authorities that take, for example, the Minister of Territorial Administration, he speaks to Cameroonians like kids. And even at the time when Mr. Bakary declared himself the winner, he went on intimidating this gentleman that he was going to lock him up and said all sorts of things. But the truth is that Cameroonians are fed up. Cameroonians are fed up. We know their tricks. They wouldn't listen to anything other than what they have concocted. And it's such a one-sided kind of, this is not even democracy, it's autocracy. The kind of democracy they practice where it is only them. They dialogue with themselves, they talk to themselves, everything is only about them. Even when Mr. Bakary challenged them that I've got my facts here. This is my raw evidence. And to them, that doesn't matter. They think the Constitutional Council is the final. But on the other hand, the Constitutional Council is highly compromised because they are partisan related. They are not working for the greater good of Cameroonians. So most of their activities it's just the same government, the same political party, CPDM, controlling all these arms that are supposed to be independent of any particular political party. Unfortunately, that is the situation that we face today.
We spoke to, a short while ago, Paul Anchang, and he said that part of the problem might have been that the opposition were not sufficiently united behind a single candidate, and that posed a problem for the electorate and could have contributed to the fact that nearly half of them didn't even show up to vote. What's your thoughts on that?
I have a bit of a contrary view because prior to the, I think about a year before this, the coalition of Cameroon Federalist groups and activists under my chairmanship, we called a few of these leaders, these political party leaders. And what we were trying to do was to weigh the atmosphere, see how they communicate with each other, create some sort of communication point, something that they would all agree on. But we realized that it was going to be a very, very, very tough one. It was an uphill task because, first of all, they had this thing where there's a lot of power tussle amongst them, ego. So we realized that, I personally noticed that and just stayed aside, had a conversation with my executive. And the next strategy was, we wait until when is the time for the election, because we also noticed that not all of them are who they claim to be. So we said it's going to be very, very tricky. Should we rely strictly on the opposition? Because in case they come together and choose a candidate, and this candidate happens to be a wrong candidate, for example, the candidate chooses to, at one point, or have any links with the regime, then the people are finished. Mm-hmm. So we now switched on, we say, we empower the people. We empower the people to choose their candidate, and all of them rally behind that person, so that in any case, this person would have been chosen by the people, and no matter what happens, this person, after having been screened, as we did with Mr. Bakary, at least we would have some level of guarantee and certainty that we are investing our votes on somebody who is ready to defend the vote. So the whole idea about the opposition coming together and choosing a candidate would have been very disastrous, because we still today know that some of these opposition political parties are not really who they are.
Right. We've run out of time, but very briefly, your statement calls for all willing civil society forces and patriotic Cameroonians to unite to ensure that Mr. Biya leaves office. What does that mean? What
Absolutely. Yes.
action are you going to take?
Thank you very much. I think it's time, in as much as they are very good at rigging elections, it's time Mr. Biya leaves office, because we think he's outlived his mandate. We will be working with other, I would say, political parties and civil society organizations, and even individuals that are ready, so that we focus more now on sending Biya out of office within the shortest possible time. And that is because we believe that Biya doesn't have that cognitive strength to rule Cameroon as the political, as a president. And I challenge any of the government officials onto this. If they think Biya has got that, that capacity, let them send him out and carry out a test. Let's see, to prove us wrong. So Biya must go.
Michael Takie, chairperson of the Coalition of Cameroon Federalist Groups and Activists, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Channel Africa Conversations.
Thank you very much for having me, and hope to see you again another time. Thank you.
And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of Channel Africa Conversations. Thank you very much indeed for tuning in. And before I go, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the program that you've just seen, and the kind of programs, conversations that you'd like us to have in the future, and with whom. You're seeing on your screen now our social media pages, and also our emails where you can contact us and share your thoughts with us. We really do look forward to hearing from you, so that Channel Africa Conversations is holding conversations that you want us to have. Until the next time, from me and the team, goodbye.